This video is a replay of a trade I took today. Now, it probably goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. I am not a financial advisor, and trading entails risk. Just because I got these results today doesn't mean that I can get these every day, nor that you can. Remember, the entire premise of the investing project and the $1 million experiment is that I am not an expert, and yet I am learning how to do this. So for heaven's sake, don't just blindly copy me. Instead, find a mentor, someone who is an expert, and join their community. Pay for their mentorship. This approach has worked very well for me, and it likely will for you too. So use this video partly as education and partly as inspiration. After all, if I can learn this, you can too. Hey all, another good day on the Russell today. We noticed coming in today that there'd been quite a bit of pullback in the overnight hours. And so yesterday was the first day in about 10 green days on the NASDAQ where we actually had a red day. And it continued. And so the market opened actually quite far down, pretty close to its low, the low of the average true range. You can see here the ATR of 452-ish. This is already down near the low. In fact, by the point that the market opened, it had already bounced a little bit off of that low. And in fact, it was quite far below the previous day's low and even below or just about at, it was bouncing right off the pre-market low. And so it was very, very close to that. So that's sort of the backdrop. Meanwhile, for some strange reason, the YM, I guess powered by UNH in particular, had just been shooting straight ups in the overnight hours, just doing the exact opposite. So very interesting to see that. But it was the Russell that was at the sweet spot for me today. And the reason is that if you zoom in on this, you can see that it had bounced off not only the previous day's low and the pre-market low. It wasn't at the ATR low, but it had a pretty substantial drop down in previous days. But it was looking, just because it was powered by the previous day's low and pre-market low and bouncing off of that, I thought, yeah, this is pretty interesting. And it was happening around the same time. And this is about, I've got stopped right now at 6:30, almost 6:34 in the morning. So right after, 4 minutes after market open. You can see that the NASDAQ is starting to bounce. We've got a oops, pull out here so you can see this. You've got a wick on this first 5-minute candle. It is bouncing close to the low of the ATR. So this is already making me think, in context, this is going to provide some upward thrust. And so this is in the backdrop. I'm looking at this now down here on the Russell. I'm thinking, yeah, this could actually very well be an interesting opportunity. Now I'm going to turn off my camera because it's blocking the thing I want to see, which is the 2-minute chart for the M2K here, which is the Russell, because I decided to get in before the first green 5-minute bar. I decided to get in on the first green 2-minute bar. In fact, I could have even snuck this entry just a little bit lower, although I didn't do that because I wanted to give it a little bit of extra room. But as we see here, I'm just going to start this up. As we see in a little while, it's going to give me some consternation, let's say, once it actually heads up here to this first target, because it almost hits it and then retraces. And I was kicking myself for not making the start just a little bit earlier, because I would have for sure grabbed that 200. And it made me sweat a little bit because it wasn't obvious that I was going to get that 200. It started to look like it was pulling back. Anyway, I'm now going to zoom out so that you can see what's going on the NQ and the ES at the same time of what's going on here on the Russell. And so we'll watch this a bit. And you can see that when the NQ starts to pull back, this has a little bit of a pause, but then as soon as it rebounds, this just takes off. And it really heads strongly upward. And as you recall from other videos, I have the stops move up to break even after it moved 100 ticks in the right direction and then split. And then the first two contracts just trail 100 points behind. And yesterday, this backfired on me and I got stopped out with like a $37 gain. But today, it all worked out and it went forward and I got my full target one here at 200 points, which on two contracts is $200. And what we'll see here is once this, you see, this is my point, where it just about hit and then it pulled back. It was just a couple of ticks away, and I was thinking, I should have gotten in a little earlier. But in any case, it came down and thought about stopping me out, but didn't quite. In any case, it turned around and went up again. And we'll see if you look here at the NQ, it was already down here because there we have the targets filled. It was already down just about at the entry point again, or at the ATR low again. Now, meanwhile, I'm going to pause this for a second because I did something a little off script today. This was heading so far up and so quickly up that I thought, you know what? This is probably going to hit my full 200 target, or the first target of 200 points and the second target of 300 points. I'm probably going to get a full 500. But what I wanted to do today was see if I could eke 600 out of it, because I figured, what the heck? I'm sitting here. At this point, it's only 7:15. The market's been open 45 minutes. And I thought, well, you know what? Let me just see. So I actually moved this up a ways. And what I moved it out of the way so it wouldn't get triggered. And then I moved my stop up, and I started by moving it down to just below this this pivot. And then when this little red bar here, you can see this little red bar, I moved it to just below that pivot as well. And I kept moving it up, looking at the 2-minute bars primarily as I was doing this. And so we'll let this go a little bit further. I did get stopped out just before it certainly had reached. Let's see, where was my 300? My 300, the 300 point would have been at 28.93. It was right about 29.13 was I think the 300, and so it was past it. 93.13. No, that's the 200. It would be 23. 23 would be the 300. So it's not quite there yet. It definitely passed it by the time I moved my stop up to a certain level and then got stopped out. So I think, I think I had moved it right to below here. Once this looked like it was rising and that this was the bottom, I think this is where I put my stop. I can't quite remember now where I put it. In any event, yeah, it headed up a bit. And see, 2922.93. Okay, so right about here, this would have triggered the second target at 300 points. And meanwhile, I started following this up at the bottom of these candles because I didn't want to give too much back. I was trying to get that extra 600, but the extra 100, but I didn't want to give up too much in the process. So once this started heading up, I kept moving this up. And I think I ended up getting ended up with $482 total. So I know I got stopped out shortly here. Okay,
Oh.
I'm officially out. And then and then of course it resumed its march upwards, but not by much. And then it actually traded backwards a little bit. It came down and retraced a bit further, and I felt a bit vindicated at that moment for having gotten out when I did. Yeah, so here's where it comes down a bit further. But what was actually happening here in the meantime, let me pause this and we can go out and look at the overall. What was happening here was the NQ, I think, was getting a little bit of overhead resistance at VWAP here. And so it was starting to pull back a little bit from that, but it muscled through that. And once it did, it ended up going all the way up to the previous day's low. And that overhead room propelled the M2K forward as well. Let this keep going here because as it turns out, a better pivot would have been right about here where we are right now. That would have been a better pivot because it had the opportunity to go all the way up, and it would have triggered the the extra 100 points. I could have achieved that today. However, at the end of the day, I didn't do it, and such is life. But I'll let this play a little bit further. Because what's interesting here is when you look over at the NQ, you can see it's heading up, and this other level of resistance, previous day low resistance, once it gets there, it actually runs into some overhead selling, and it sells off quite substantially. And at the same time, you can see what's happening with the Russell. It's also following suit. So once we've gotten up here, we've got some overhead resistance. Now the sell-off begins in more earnest. And so it's interesting to see that, I might have eked out that extra 100 points if I played it a little bit better, maybe. but that was about all I was going to get, because you can clearly see it's now selling off rather substantially. So all in all, I'm not too worried about this. This was a good trade. I eked out. Well, I mean, $500 would have been the quote unquote perfect trade for this bracket. I got 482 of it while I was in an effort to try to get to the full to get to 600. I don't know. I'll take that trade for $12. I had a shot at making 100. Oh well. This was a good trade. Happy to do it.